had these finance meetings for quite some time now, talking about the county's budget situation, long-term prospects for reducing costs. A lot of this stuff is involved around discussions of recommendations made by PFM. Today's topic, however, is an area that the county is looking at very, very closely in terms of its long-term strategy for both cost containment and improved performance in the area of transportation. We have with us Bill Jones from the Capital Area Transit Authority, who will be presenting their proposals for next year's budget. What we'd like to do is, if we could, allow Bill to make his presentation, save 20 to 30 minutes, whatever you need. And we could hold off on any questions until Bill finishes, and then open the floor to discussion. I know in talking to people, there are lots and lots of things that interest people about this. And there'll probably be plenty of discussion, but if we could, just give Bill a chance to put his presentation out there, hold the questions, and then we'll open the floor. So without any further hold up, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Larry. Well, thank you very much for having us today. I get to see you again, Commissioner, second time today after the chamber event this morning. And I do appreciate the chance to sit in front of you. And I do want to start out with an apology. And what that goes back to, I know there's been issues in the past where this board has said that they feel like they've been kept in the dark. And for the last slightly over 3 years, Tom and I have the longest tenure, but then we've had Randy and Bob join us over time. We've been chasing our tails trying to get it. When we took over, we were maxed out on our credit lines. We found out that grants had been spent ahead up to almost 2 years. So we had quite a hornet's nest sitting in front of us. Since that time, we've been able to go through all the grants, make sure everything's up to date. We've got our credit lines pulled off or paid off. Well, just about paid off. I think we're about even at this point in time, Randy. We're out of debt. We have the grants to the point that we're almost even. We've realigned the grants so that we're not spending ahead in grants. So to do that, we've had to have cost containment for well over 3 years. We've really had to, when you're talking on a $19 to $20 million budget, in 3 years to turn it around like that. It was a monumental task, and I couldn't do it without these gentlemen around me. Moving forward, we're committed to cost containment. We've been working, like I said, we've been working on it for years. I think at this point in time, we need a formalized plan, so we'll be looking for some help to do that. The board committed to, in August, committed to having a formalized cost containment plan, and they want it done by the end of the year. So we will have a formalized cost containment plan moving forward. So please bear with us, and we'll talk some of the efforts that we've done historically, and moving forward, what we see is our priorities that we have been. Asset utilization, we've got to make sure that we're maximizing every asset we have, include right down to our passenger fares. We've got to have a better way to make sure that the passenger pays their fair share, a long-term plan for making sure that it just goes along, it keeps up with inflation, if not improving it. And we know we've got some issues right now in equity versus certain ways, but we need to collect some data to satisfy Title VI requirements, which Bob is working on right now, so that we can have the data to justify, or when FTA comes and visits us next summer, I think we would be a little bit issue. So we've got to make sure that we're doing it the proper way. And last but not least is efforts of regionalization. The CAT board is committed to regionalization, whether that be through a cooperation agreements are covered in the Act 89, or whether that be a full-up consolidation. There's got to be a better way of doing business and we've got to find that way. And I think what we've done internally is a part of that. When we re-engineer a process, we don't say, okay, that's done and we move on. We're constantly going back and re-engineering, looking for better better ways to do things. And we have to look to our neighbors around us. Is there ways to share staff, share routes, share technologies? There's a lot of opportunities. We have reached out with not a whole lot of, I will say, a whole lot of success at this point in time, everybody. I think a lot of people are sitting back waiting for the outcome of the consolidation study, but I still think there's other opportunities. I can say my board member, Don Guidesway, has reached out to Lebanon County. Unfortunately, at this point in time, due to a family emergency, they're not able to meet with us, but we are reaching out. I've talked to other transit authorities about sharing staff from HR. I still think we have an opportunity in fare collection. There's a lot of opportunities out there that we must make sure that we maximize. We owe it to our customers, we owe it to the taxpayers, we owe it to you as the elected officials. So, before you is, I do apologize for that initial document I sent to you, but, I tried to take, Kurt was the author of that, and I took that very seriously when he asked for that data. And we tried to, unfortunately, there is a lot, and this is a very tough subject to digest. There's a lot of information over, lapping fiscal years, when you have, you are on a calendar year, the counties and the city are on a calendar year, the state's on the state fiscal year from July 1st through June 30th, and then you have the federal government that's on in October through September. It makes very difficult, so when you're aligning all these programs, it makes it very difficult to align everything. But what I did earlier today is I did send you ahead. I hope you had an opportunity to print it off and look at it. It's a condensed version of what we did, and I will say to you, there is one change that I would like to tell you about, and that's under the progression of the local match towards 15%. The one in the executive summary is slightly different off of the one from the original document. What I did is when that was originally calculated, there's several ways to calculate local match, and actually within the Enabling It legislation, Act 89, when it comes to operations, the match is 15% of the amount provided, where in capital, it's 3 1/3% of the project. And if you play those percentage, and actually the original one, it was 3 1/3 of the project, which did slightly skew the numbers. These updated numbers you can see are, but we're still far off from the full required 15%. This year, for your request, it's made up of 3 basic components. Or actually 4, let me just correct that. We only asked for the Act 89 minimum amount for the base CAT system. Because in the past, when we were adding an additional, we didn't worry about the various fiscal years, but in reality, we're asking for, it would be the last half of the fiscal year we're in this year, which the required for that is $804,941, and the first half of next year, which is the $845,188. Add those together, divide by 2, you come up with $825,065, and then it's split out according to the way the funding agreement was written from the percentages. And then there's the additional amount that has been committed to the service down in Shippensburg, the Carlisle circulator, and then I know, speaking to members of this board, the issue of shortfall from previous years is an issue, and the CAT board at the last board meeting, I approved this methodology that hopefully we can get everybody to get up to date on the arrear amount, and everybody can be on a level playing field moving forward. I think your 301, 198 you'll find is down from last year. So I feel it's a fair request moving forward. And it provides, but then we've still got a lot of work moving forward. As you know, CAT has 30 routes, 11 of them are in Cumberland County, with about 37 of the system. 37% of the system, but which providing about 800 or 475,000 rides. And the rides here at average, the service average is about 18 rides an hour. We're trying to increase our outreach to the different communities throughout our whole service area, but some of the stuff that's been going on with that concerns you. I know Bob Philbin, our customer service, planning, customer service, and
Public
information officer, has been doing a lot of outreach in the area with Cat Connects. He's met with Amazon, a lot of the different warehousing interests out south in your Carlisle business district. Yesterday you met with who else did you meet with yesterday?
Moore College yesterday and the County Public Assistance Office. We're tentatively working routes that would incorporate those entities.
So you're talking about circulating.
Yes, on that, but when we're talking the other Carlisle, the warehousing, Amazon and such, we do have some service out of Harrisburg coming out to that warehousing area right now. At Ross, at the Ross warehouse. But we're being approached by the other warehouses out there. They need workers, and they're looking to the Harrisburg area. We're trying to find ways to increase that service, but we have to live within our means, so we have to find out how can we economize in other areas to reallocate that funds to provide this service. Much needed, these are jobs, well-paying jobs, and we're trying to help these businesses not just survive, but thrive. Jobs are very important to everyone going forward. Can you speak to any other outreach efforts?
We've conducted, I'm going to say approximately 15 CAT Connects, we call them, in the borough. Underserved populations, different citizen groups, chamber, the downtown association. So we've been in front and listened to a variety of community representatives in the last several months. That input is helping us shape future service.
The bus Dickinson too.
Dickinson as well, a couple times at Dickinson.
So there's a lot of outreach going on throughout all of Cumberland County, but and a lot of Carlisle because of the Carlisle circulator. I know we have seen some articles talking about a low ridership. Only now, I believe this is over the next 3 to 6 months when we'll really see true growth. And it's going to take a full year before it even catches on. The transit service is not the field of dreams. It isn't you build it and they're going to come. You're just going to jump out of their car and jump on the bus. It takes a changing of habits. When it comes to college students, the parents come and say, hey, why am I giving you a car? Take the bus. There's a lot of habits that have to be changed. And when people find the benefits of this, if people find they can age in place gracefully and still have a bus at their convenience and change their habits as their lifestyle changes, that's when we will find. So I'm just going to ask you to be patient. We're working closely with Kirk as we work with the other funding partners on this service. I still think it has a huge amount of potential, huge amount. But again, the numbers have to drive our decisions, not just what we feel. It's purely based in numbers. Moving forward, other cost containment. I want to go back to the cost because I know that's key to this board. What are you doing? And I would like to have Tom speak to what we've done in like operators' wages. I know you heard a lot about our, the contract that we signed, but I think you need to look at what we've done over time internally to help control these costs.
Right now, if you look at our two major cost drivers in wages itself, primarily it's through the operations department, mainly the drivers and our maintenance department. Between those two departments itself, makes up approximately 175 of our 212 employees. So right there is our biggest workforce. In the operations piece itself, we have 86 full-time fixed route operators and another 30 full-time paratransit drivers. In fixed route, we're allowed to have up to, by labor agreement, 13 part-time drivers, and in paratransit, it's up to 50% or 15 part-time drivers there. Looking over the past 3 years, one of the first things that I looked at in the operations is just how we were spending the money, how we were cutting the work, how the schedules were working. Where in our paratransit division, we were paying probably 35% overtime. In our fixed route department, we were closer to probably 40% overtime. So we looked at, and plus we had 92 full-time fixed route drivers. So just looking at how we cut the work, how we implement or how we schedule the drivers, we were able to cut all the way from 92 to 86 full-time drivers. And we have consistently on paratransit, when we were 35% overtime, we're consistently operating about 2.5% of the scheduled hours in overtime now. So kind of the low-hanging fruit of where's the money fall through the gaps. Fixed route, and once again, they were probably closer to 40% overtime. We cut that down to where they're about 3% overtime. So we've taken and controlled costs through scheduling of our employees, which the service has pretty much stayed standard or stayed at the same level for the past 4 years, but we've been able to actually reduce the overall cost of that workforce, both paratransit and fixed route. On the maintenance end, and some of this is contract changes that we're getting in. Once again, we had a very high amount of overtime. It was truly driving the cost of our maintenance program. Over the past year and a half, we've kind of done 2 transitions, and this is a work in progress, so it's going to be a lot of work coming in the next year at this point. But we put a much higher focus on, and me, going back 30 years ago, I was a mechanic myself, and it was great to come into work and fix something. That's what they all want to do, is fix something that's broken. We've taken our focus and said, our concentration needs to be making sure things never break. So we've implemented an aggressive preventative maintenance program, and with that, we have cut the overtime in maintenance by about 40%. It's still, we're close to where we want it to be, but it's getting a lot closer. So just in changing how we do our work on a daily basis, putting our emphasis where it should be on prevention versus repair. We have taken our 2 largest workforces where the majority of the money is gone and actually reduced the cost to have the same amount of work.
Thanks, Tom. As you can see, this is a team effort. I couldn't do it without these guys. Tom, Bob, and Randy, and I know Randy, he'll be the quiet one in the corner. He's your quintessential director of finance, but I tell you one thing, this man's good, and he has helped us, straighten out. We found identified over $2 million in overdue receivables, got it straightened out, got it taken care of. He implemented a complete new finance package, software package. It's improved our efficiency. It's actually reduced the number of staff members necessary, and we constantly get better at what we're doing. And we're looking for other ways to save through time and attendance modules, other ways that we can be more efficient in that area. Other things that he's led on, he re-engineered our fare collection, how we collect our fares and count it, to the point that it's saving about $35,000 a year. Some of that we were contracting out, we're doing in-house now. We did a joint purchase of our auditing services with Rapid Transit. That amounted to a savings of $65,000 over 2 years. So, and we're looking in, one of the reasons we actually only went with a 2-year contract too is that at that point in time, Lebanon Transit will be looking at one, and we can add more and grow that group even larger. So we're looking for other efficiencies when it comes to that. Again, I go back to approaching the neighboring transit authorities for other opportunities to joint bidding. And right now, we work with for our fuel and utilities are purchased through a consortium. So we've made significant savings there. And I want to go back to the labor agreement. I know we talked about, anytime somebody gets a raise in a tight economy, it's issues, but the union has made great strides at working with us. And the thing that encouraged me most about this labor agreement, it had much better attendance policies. And anytime there's an issue, I want to look at myself first. What am I doing wrong here before I start pointing the finger? And I looked at myself as part of the CAT management team, and I looked at this labor agreement and said, we're telling our employees it's okay not to come to work. And it's not that and moving forward, we've got to find a way to change that communication. Let them know how important attendance is. And, we've made huge strides. It's nowhere near where we ultimately want to end. Our goal is not to say, I got you, or caught you doing something wrong. What we want to do is correct bad habits. We want you to succeed, but we can't people can't succeed if they do not have an idea how to do it properly. So we're trying to set rules and regulations to communicate. These are to help you do the job better. How important you are to the CAT team. We need you here. So moving forward, I look to myself, I look to our team, we need to be communicating what those positive messages are going forward instead of bashing heads. I think, again, the labor contract we have, it's only 2 years. It actually expires in June. Some people, oh boy, great, we're going to be back throwing stones. I contend no. I believe the union has committed to working with us. They see other opportunities. This 2-year agreement is an opportunity moving forward to make more constructive changes to this agreement so that we can provide better service, more cost-efficient service, and help grow this region. Find a way to create those commuter routes out to the industrial park. I think the system needs re-engineered moving forward. It's still, if you look at a lot of the routes that we have in place right now, they look very similar to what was in place back in the 40s and 50s. There's better ways of doing business. We've got to find it, and we're committed to doing that. So, that being said, and let me go back one last thing, and I can say, I want to talk to the board. Up till 3 years ago, this board, it had a strategic plan, but it lacked some direction and clarity. The board has been setting very specific goals for us. When they created the strategic plan, it made it very clear. And I can tell you, as these 3 gentlemen leading the primary departments of making sure what goes on at CAT, they're taking that strategic plan, they're forming their work plan, they're working with their staff to formulate a work plan that accomplishes those goals. I know that the current CAT strategic plan doesn't specifically say cost containment. We need to make that, revisit that, and that will be happening in January. But, the one statement talks about being good stewards of the public fund, of public money. I do believe we are, we're getting better. Can we do better? Yes, but we will. And we can only do one step. You gotta crawl before you walk and walk before you run. Only now I feel are we getting CAT to the point that we can start growing and making really something, but we have to do it in a very cost-effective way. We have to do the formal cost containment plan. We have to have a TDP or transit development plan moving forward so that as we realize savings, what is the best way to invest in this region with the existing money we have. And the board, the staff, everyone at CAT is committed to providing this region the best service possible. That being said, we're here for answer your questions.
Back office stuff on regionalization. Have you looked at any opportunities there to consolidate any back office work? I'm seeing a nod back here, but I'm asking you, Bill.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I reached out to Rich Farr from Rabbit. I want to hire an HR person, I wanted to share. He chose to go along his own. I still think there's opportunities there's a lot. And I know the board, and like I said, Dawn's trying to meet. We actually, Chairman Bugale has been stressing that we need to meet with the other transit authorities. We tried to meet at PPTA last year, our annual transit conference. The other transit authorities couldn't make it, but we're committed. We're going to continue knocking on their door until they open it up.
You have a staff of what, 21?
21, yes.
Well, I want to just throw a couple numbers real quick.
Yes, sir.
So your total request of Cumberland County for this year is 301,198, is that right?
Correct, sir.
Okay. And that includes grader, that includes the Carlisle circulator, and that includes your suggested shortfall from previous years?
Yes.
Okay. So can you just explain then how it is that you're asking for $30,000 below what we allocated last year, and probably $50,000 below what you requested last year?
Well, for years, and it was at the request of the funding partners, there was an additional amount added to it, to above the minimum request. That I can't tell you how far that would go back. That was for capital purchases, that was for working capital. This year, we said we are only committed to asking for the state minimum. We know everybody's in dire straits, and I can't sit and tell you that we have a formalized plan how we would spend every dollar. I think moving forward, we're going to have issues when large purchases come up. It could skew those numbers, that annual request. I think there needs to be a way of long-term planning, but CAT doesn't have that plan, so how can I look you in the eye and ask for it?
Well, that was to be honest with you, that was one of the initial things that led us to raise some questions last year, was because you were asking for more than what we were required under the law to provide in terms of the increase in funds. So we wanted, we started to delve into that a little bit more. But to be clear then, if all of the funding partners, and I believe the request of all the funding partners is below or somewhere.
Yeah, one is just slightly above.
Slightly above, but essentially it takes care, this will also take care of that
Yes.
issue with respect to whether or not some pay their full bill or not.
Correct, sir.
Okay. I just want to, I'm sure we'll have some other questions along the way, but I do appreciate, Bob's efforts here in terms of the outreach, to try to identify, other areas where we may have needs. But I just want to make a point, and that is that essentially, I was over at the State of the City breakfast this morning, and I heard the mayor speak, and I think he is moving forward in trying to address the issues of our hub of this region, and that is to revive the city of Harrisburg and address its financial issues. And I think that's a benefit to all of us as a region. And I make that to preface my comment now, and that is that the reality, however, is that things have changed. And you and I have talked about this, and I've talked to our members on the CAT board about this as well. But it's been a long time since the city of Harrisburg was the focal point for an awful lot of people in this region. And I just make this one observation, that, and I appreciate the focus on the borough of Carlisle here. But I come from an area, essentially that's the immediate burb, if you will, of the city of Harrisburg. It's a big part of this county. Most of the people who live in Cumberland County still live on the immediate west shore. And from my vantage point, it's an underserved area with respect to transportation. I'll give you this point, I'm going to make this point. You take just a couple of our municipalities on the immediate west shore, and you've got a population greater than the city of Harrisburg. You take on the east shore, you take Lower Paxton Township, and you have as many residents as live in the city of Harrisburg. So what I would ask is that as we continue to address the issue of cost containment, try to make sure that we're as efficient as possible, as part of this process, and I think it was built into our agreement here that we're going to have an annual review, or we're going to look at the service that we provide, and I think there needs to be more attention paid to providing service where there is none today in some of these areas. So anyway, that's just a little extra. Thank you.
In response to that, I will tell you, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't, underserved areas, you have the area off of Wardsville Road out where Pinnacle Hospital's built their new facility. There's issues there. And with Novitas in the old Patriot News building.
There's a new office building, by the way, going up in East Pennsburg Township.
Yeah.
Right on 11 and 15 there too.
Yeah, so there's a lot.
You have that whole office complex.
And again, Bob is
Well, the
working
new
on.
giant.
Yeah, the giant, oh,
huge.
yeah, we can understand that. But the issue we have is, one, there isn't a pot of money out there to create all kinds of new service. So, but Bob's, in the meantime, Bob's staff is designing ways to serve that area. But in the while we're doing that, we also have to go out and make sure that, how can we economize in other areas so that we're not overextending ourselves?
In the pilot that's underway here in Carlisle, which I was a big proponent of, and I'm glad to see it work. And we know how that was put together. You had a lot of partners that were involved in that. You got the private sector, you got the local government, the public sector involved in it. I'm just saying, I think that there needs to be some outreach, more outreach, continued outreach, and ongoing outreach. There's a lot of businesses in the immediate West Shore area as well. I personally think that if you had some kind of shuttle route, around, and it was on a regular basis, that you could pry some of these individuals from their individual automobiles. I really do.
I agree.
And it would improve, our whole traffic situation.
Yeah, another one, just, and not to give you more fuel, is why do you, if you want to go from Mechanicsburg to Carlisle on the West Shore, why do you have to go to downtown Harrisburg and take another bus and come? We know that there's a lot of issues.
You and I have talked about that,
Yeah.
and that is my point.
Yes, we couldn't agree more.
Don?
Just to let you know, and Bill hinged on it in the beginning, Eric asked me as vice chair, since I have a little bit more time than he does with his job, and it keeps them doing what they need to do, to coordinate with LT. And I've been to get together with their general manager, their chairman and vice chair. Terry Giordano and I had that pretty well rolling and getting set up to meet here within the next probably 2 weeks. Her husband was in a very serious motorcycle accident 10 days ago. So at the moment, her effort is sort of in that direction. But I have been talking to their chairman, and we're going to get together. And some of the main things that we're after, or we want to get started on, are mutual cooperative things. You touched on them, like HR. We lease tires. We don't know if they do. Can that be concerned? Those kind of things, because the more mutual agreement type situations we have, or commitments we have, will help in reduction of matching funds under Act 89. So it benefits Lebanon County, and it benefits Cumberland, Dauphin, Harrisburg County once we get this kind of thing rolling. But we, the board, basically decided to start with LT first, and then work from there to Rabbit. I mean, we're always in constant touch with Rich. Kirk knows that. We all talk, all the time. But that's where we decided to start first. And Terry, I can't think of the gentleman's name that's their chairman to save my soul. But Terry totally agrees with it. It's a type of thing we need to do. We have a lot of joint meeting at the Hershey. What made me think of it too was Commissioner Hertzer saying at the Hershey Transfer Center. We can pick up and bring them to people to Harrisburg with a transfer ticket, rather than them having to run another bus the whole way to Harrisburg, and vice versa. These are some of the things that are on the 5 items of the agenda that we want to work with. So just to let everybody know, that's where we are.
I would say just a couple of things. Number one, we've never had any problem with responsiveness with any of the other transit authorities that we've spoken to. We've spoken to quite a few. Number two, when we talk about there not being pots of money, I think there are some big pots of money out there that not only could we provide existing service for less money, but additional service for less money. I'm going to turn this over to Mike and Kirk, who have done a lot of a lot of basic research into some of the numbers, and that's some things I know that they wanted to suggest to us.
Just if I could ask for Bill to talk about the last two items, you sent a letter in your funding request, and you talk about performance measures. Did you include the 2015 budget year-to-date current and the 2015 target? That indicates performance trend.
Yes.
Okay.
Repeat your question, Mike. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
you
exactly what you're
say,
saying there.
Act legislation shows a distinct pattern of increased performance, and then you show the current year-to-date, and then next year's budget and next year's target. Things that I'd like to see in the future, I
Yes.
think may make more sense, is a history of, say, over the past 3 years. I think performance is best measured by actual results rather than projections, targets, and budgets. Can I ask you to explain, you indicate then in the last paragraph that you scaled back your funding request as you just talked on. But it seems like you're saying we may have to come back for special grants where you run into some financial difficulties. Can you explain what situations may cause this?
Well, again, I touched on this earlier when I talked about we're going to, in between 2016 and 2018, we have to replace over half of our fleet. We're eligible to replace. We don't have the money to replace it all right now, and it will take a local share. If there's, various other capital projects that could come up, if there's a special study grant, to do a transit development plan, to do a full-blown traditional transit development plan, even though I think there's some pluses and minuses doing it, they're very expensive to do. But if we try to, if these opportunities come up and this, the state would say, here's $500,000 for X endeavor, but you've got to come up with a local share. Moving forward, I think, in the short term, we can cover that, but long term, I think we need to be projecting out long term all of our capital needs, and doing other capital improvements. State of good repair would be number one, but capital improvement being number two. What the, projected cost, what the costs are to all the funding partners, including FTA, PennDOT, and the 3 local funding partners, what that would look like so that there aren't large spikes in certain years over time. But that's going to take a very detailed plan. I'm just trying to sit there and say, it isn't rosy, we've got to do this a better way. That's all I'm trying to say. And to go back to your other thing, Mike, about the performance, when you talk, you're saying how you just saw the budget. If you would go back and see, those targets were set for CAT, those Act 44 performance indicators were set 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now. And we have been slowly progressing, increasing to the point that we are going to meet or exceed them. So we've done our job. So if you want to see that historically, we'd be more than glad to.
You provided a 5-year projection for capital needs. What's the total local match in that projection, that 5-year projection going forward? Approximately.
It's about $100,000 at this point.
Over 5 years.
Being here over the 5-year period, with the first year actually being the current year.
So that would average about, what, $20,000 per year?
So you're saying only $100,000 more on top of what we're at today, or $100,000 a year more?
It's 100,000, this current 5-year plan is 100,000 more for the 5-year period.
So
However, and this is some of the changes in law. One of the funding sources that we've been able to capture on through our CMAQ has always been 100%. This year, it has gone to where it'll no longer be 100%, it's only 80% funding. So it's a change that in the future, as we use that funding, there's going to be a greater need for local match. But the way we've used it, we figured a way to stretch into the next few years so that we don't have to come to the three local partners and ask for more money.
I've got a question, and I've only been around for 14 months, so pardon my ignorance. But in previous discussions, when we discussed why we were being asked to pay more than the minimum required, there was discussion that part of that was to pay for capital stuff. Yet now I'm hearing that the status of our capital budget is not particularly healthy. So I'm wondering, is the money that has been designated for capital improvements or capital set aside, have they been used to cover operating expenses? And that's why our capital budget is in such bad shape?
Yes, and I've made that, I think numerous times I've made that very clear, and it's right on this summary. It's included in there. When, remember, when this group took over in 2011, we were spent about 2 years ahead in grants, and we'd maxed out our credit lines. We had to right the ship, and we couldn't keep going further and further in debt. So, when the Route 81 service was created, which is the one coming out of Shippensburg, and the Route 23 service, those two services were created with the idea, Act 44 was to be in place and it was supposed to be growing. We created using CMAQ funds, which is very similar to the demonstration money that we're using right now for the Carlisle circulator. But the idea is that our base grant would grow to meet that. Well, it not only did it not grow, it actually went the other way, putting us in further shape. Now we had two very successful services that we, do we take them off when they're successful? When also the legislature was trying to pass new transit funding, did we make cuts? Yes, we did. In, what was it, December of 2011, we cut about 11% of our service. And that was on top of several other small cuts. So we have been slowly paring back with the idea that we're trying to minimize the impact upon the customers who depend upon us, but we're also trying to live within our means. And as I think if you look at those targets, we've got to the point where we are living within our means.
I'd like to sort of redirect back to a question that Barb raised at the very beginning, when she asked about the number of positions, administrative positions that we have. And we talk about potential pots of gold, okay? It's my understanding, based on research that I have seen, that the number that you gave in response to Barb's question, to Commissioner Cross's question, in fact, far exceeds the administrative staffing levels for any comparable transit authority, certainly in this region. And I think we have some additional
Well, I think
numbers.
Rabbit has 5, maybe 6 or so staff. I can't.
Yeah, right.
off the top. I mean, I just found it was sort of disproportionately high compared to services being delivered by others in similar situations.
For general administration, comparing CAT to Rabbit, Red Rose, and Erie Metropolitan, I can say, and it's completely relevant and contextual, that Rabbit Transit and Red Rose, York and Lancaster serve a larger population. There's more people in the area they serve. Yet CAT spends just $10,000 short of $1 million more on general administration costs than Rapid Transit, and about $1.2 million more than Red Rose Transit. Interestingly, Red Rose is merging with Reading BARDA, and they anticipate administrative savings of about $800,000. So, one would imagine if in such a comparatively efficient organization such as Red Rose, a merger or cooperative personnel sharing type arrangement, however that can be accomplished, could well result in significantly more than $800,000 of savings. But in staffing, and I think kind of going to the core, what's the cost driver behind those numbers I cite is the personnel. There's 22 personnel in CAT working in general administration. Again, compared to an average of right at 7 for each of Rabbit, Red Rose, and Erie. And if those organizations are functioning successfully and efficiently, kind of begs the question in regard to CAT and their administration. Driving, driving what drove this inquiry was taking a look at the funding levels, published by PennDOT and reported by yourself. The fact that the Act 44 minimum, which you're billing us now, we covered, and I appreciate you not giving the extra ask, except for the prior year shortfall you alleged, but I suggest is probably not appropriate, is the fact that both Red Rose and Rabbit spend between $300,000 and $400,000 of local subsidy. And that's all they get, except for a little bit of capital match, kind of like yourself. Whereas the last year, numbers were published for all agencies, CAT included. We gave you $1 million more. And that was, that included about $400,000 or $500,000 more than the minimum. So those other organizations are living within the state statutory minimum, the amount that were required. We don't have to, those counties didn't have to go to their taxpayers and take extra funds to pass through to their transit agency.
I guess it kind of boils down to why does it cost so much? I mean, just from a layperson's perspective, if you look at the average resident, when they look at some of the data, they look at, the past couple of years, there has been an extra ask. That extra ask has gone into operations. Why is CAT so unique, and why does it cost so much? I know there's efforts to bring those costs down, but we're responsible to our taxpayers to tell them that answer. I think that's the answer we're driving. Why does this happen?
Well, and I'll tell you, when you're hearing sort of the anxiousness, and I'm going to use that term, on the capital expense that we may be hearing, I would certainly thought or believe that in a plan for someone would have been addressed. In other words, the replacement of the fleet, maintenance facilities, consolidation, whatever. I'm kind of surprised to hear that, well, now the fleet might have to be replaced.
Maybe.
I mean, that would have been, in my impression, sort of a 5-year plan, either purchasing in a cycle of vehicles or identifying that early on. I mean, local funding for capital is, perhaps not as high as it should be, if that's what you're looking at, or you're just going to go out and borrow the money again.
If I may, I'm on the finance committee, Kat. I see with now 4 years of experience, two significant, I think these gentlemen are doing everything reasonably possible within the structures that we're currently working under to contain cost and do things. I see two areas where we can bring the cost of providing transit services here in Cumberland County in line with other counties. One is our union contract. I do concur with Bill. I personally believe that there was a change in the union, and I think that they recognize that there's a disparity, between what their union members are making and other union members are making in neighboring transit agencies. I think it would be untoward to expect that we're going to get 0, 0, 0, for several years to bring it in. But maybe, just maybe, if part of a long-term strategy could be 1% or 1.5% per year, and over a period of years there would be convergence, of labor costs, which I think would help. The second thing is regionalization and consolidation. So I have to soon leave. I have a question. We have reached out to LT, and we will be meeting with them. Does this board and administration favor us also making a public outreach to Rapid Transit? But I mean now, okay. and to bring a discussion of Rabbit, CAT, and LT at the table simultaneously, especially in light of the fact, well, not the fact yet, but the potential that there might be a 525-mile overlap in service area here on January 1st between Rabbit and CAT, which I'm speaking specifically of Cumberland County. So is your desire, is your guidance, is your expectation that we work with Rapid simultaneous to attempting to work
I
with
think,
LT?
I think the fundamental question, to quickly pick up on it, the fundamental question is, again, with all appreciation for the efforts that people make, what you described is, in order to answer Kirk's question, how do we get that cost curve to come down? You're describing a valiant, long-term, slog it out, incremental, going to take a long, long time with a lot of variables to ever get to the point close to where we want to be. And what we've discovered is that there's a very quick way to get to a lot better way, a lot better place than we are now, and it is through regionalization. And it doesn't take 5 years, it doesn't take 10 years, it doesn't, as a matter of fact, it could happen relatively quickly. I think it's a question of priority, so I can't speak for the Board of Commissioners. But there's a lot of effort going on amongst a lot of different partners and a lot of different players to try and come up with a system and approach that is going to provide the best possible service, not only existing service, but expanded and improved service at the lowest possible cost. And I think anybody who took an economics course in college, I know Bobby Gross has slept through his, but he did help to pass his final exam. It knows that if you can achieve economies of scale, that you can really reduce your unit costs. So I don't know that regionalization is made up of a number of steps, but those steps are at hand. They're not something misty in the future. There are people out there who are doing a much better job. And to the extent that everybody gets together and takes advantage of that, I think we can be in a lot better place in a lot shorter amount of time.
And if there's anything favorable about the high-cost situation that we're facing with CAT is that there's certainly a lot of economies of scale to be gained as the data shows. And we're fortunate at this point in time that the state through Act 4489 allows then local county tax relief, if you will, in the form of abatement of subsidy for a 5-year window. Should you be able to find that? And given the fact, I mean, if we were sitting here with Rapid or Redwoods, then we'd be discussing splitting a $300,000 or $400,000 total subsidy request instead of $1 million. And we've been doing that for a very long time, in addition to your ask for $300,000 to $500,000 more per year. Which is total, just the additional ask has been 2.6 million, above and beyond the already high state minimum. So huge opportunities for us. I ran the numbers since it's rather formulaic. And locally, between the city of Harrisburg, Dauphin County, and Cumberland County, there's about $4.7 million of savings over a 5-year period from the time CAD initiates regionalization, a regionalization plan approved by PennDOT. So, and I think our taxpayers will like that. That would be an enormous help for the Cumberland County budget. The amount flowing through the Cumberland County budget over that 5-year window would say about a 30% allocation of your subsidy would be about $1.5 million, which is pretty significant. It's hard to find that kind of benefit for all those taxpayers, in any other single area. And at the end of the day, you guys would be more efficient, and then you could put the money into the expanded services that Jim's looking at requesting.
And I think questions like building a new maintenance facility, I've not heard anybody who doesn't think that this area needs a new maintenance facility. But the whole issue of a maintenance facility being built should not, I don't think at this point, be viewed within the context of that, but should be viewed future-looking in terms of potentially regionalization. Could you have a new maintenance facility located to serve 2 or 3 counties simultaneously, rather than CAT pursuing this as a CAT initiative to serve only the existing funding partners of CAT? I think it requires a dramatic and, dare I say, revolutionary change of perspective. Revolutionary in the fact that you're trying to compress a lot of change into a short period of time, which stands in somewhat contrast to the incremental smooth things that I think you deserve a lot of credit for pursuing. But the fact of the matter is we have some very major changes that could take place in a very short period of time, should we adopt the notion that there is a pretty quick path in which to pursue and view things like a new maintenance facility, not from the perspective of simply CAT, but what's best for a potential regional partnership that could be put together over the next 6 to 18 months.
That's one of the issues on our list to start talking with IT about, with LT. I mean.
But it's not just LT, it's.
I understand
it's
that,
your
but I'm just saying
county,
that's on that, and we're from that toward, right. We're in contact with Rich quite frequently. Another thing I wanted to mention, and I think Kirk, I don't know if Mike's aware of this or not, Kirk might be aware of this. Up until about 4 years ago, we had other ways of generating revenue. Chartering buses. We used to make a good bit of revenue from chartering buses. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, it was about 4 years ago that a bus operator in Iowa got a federal lawsuit against all federal regulations about a change against all public transportation facilities in the country that we can't charter buses anymore. It was in competition to the local, Wolf and those kind of operations. The only other stream of revenue that we have to make are those big blue billboards running around town. And these two gentlemen will tell you, I've been beating on the table every board meeting about getting more advertising on them, selling them out. I think we're still using a company called Direct Media, isn't that it? And I'm beating on them all the time about selling that advertising. So it just, and that applies to us, to Rabbit, to LT, all of us are in that boat. We can't rent, we got big, heavy shops. We can't contract out to maintain 2 triaxles for something. That's a killer for us in reference to revenue, additional revenue generation. So a lot of people don't realize that, and they don't realize how little goes into the pot from fares. What is it? What's the percentage? I forget, Bill. About 18, 20%, something like that. So, if we had some of these other things to generate revenue, it would cut down on a lot of us begging and pleading, for more money and to the state and whatever. And a lot of people don't realize that. So, he'll tell you. I sit down all the time trying to figure out ways to sell more advertising. It's Christmas, whatever. So,
Don,
sir,
you've reported us on that numerous times, so
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that. But the question I have is, you said it yourself, these changes apply to all the other agencies
Yeah.
as well. So I'm trying to get straight here, what is different for us that is not different for them?
I think the biggest
Based on, Mike's
I
analysis
understand.
here of the
We're
disparities
the,
between
we're the
costs.
third, I think it's the third, we're the third oldest transportation company, so to speak, in Pennsylvania. A whole lot came with that, and that's been trying to be whittled down over the years. There was a period of time, right about when you all put me on the board, that we were starting to see what had happened and what was happening. And it's been a momentous project to get that sorted out, which I think, I've spoken to all 3 of you about. That is what I see really as the holdup. We have, at the board level, have talked under the cost containment concept, personnel containment. One of the things that came up in this past union agreement was the improvement of it, and Bill touched on it, of attendance. Also allowing us to possibly hire more part-time drivers. That cuts down, we're still providing the service, but it cuts down on health benefits, the retirement, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So that's where we're really headed with the union contracts and union agreements on trying to whittle some of those things down. And as most of us sitting around this room understand, unfortunately, that doesn't happen as fast as I would like it to happen, or any of the rest of you. The other things that can happen pretty quickly, we're getting on that.
Here's what I don't understand. I don't understand when you use the word attendance.
I didn't hear you.
I do not understand when you use the word attendance, why that seems to be such an obstacle. It is work. You're expected to come to work. So the fact that I've heard this, read it in the paper, and now in this room, we're still hashing out this sort of attendance issue, I find to be appalling.
Well,
I just
welcome
take
to
it
my-
that way.
welcome
So
to my
I'm
world.
putting it out there, that I take that to be appalling.
You and I come
So-
from,
I think the question about the unions is, first of all, I would disagree. There's effective labor strategies and
Right.
there's ineffective labor strategies. But let's look at the stuff, let's get back to that question that was raised earlier on. There's something that CAT can control tomorrow. You've got a factor of what kind of, in terms of the number of administrative staff relative to other transit authorities. I mean,
368% increase in administrative staffing as compared to the average.
and with plans, I think, to fill positions up to an additional $500,000. So it's not getting better, it's going to get worse. That is something that you don't have to negotiate as part of the labor agreement. That is something that CAT controls itself. It raises two fundamental questions. One, how did it get that way? And two, what could be done to fix it? And back to Kirk's question, how is it that other people can run their operations on a much leaner and meaner basis and produce as good, if not better, results?
And a point that hasn't been talked about, but is critical for both service and the cost component, is maintenance. I look at your self-reported data statewide of all transit agencies running fixed route service, bus service. And CAT's tied with a couple others, but there's only one that has a more frequent breakdown rate based on number of buses typically in service at a high point of the year. You're aware of what I'm talking about. And most other agencies are half that or lower. So the maintenance, we're talking about maintenance facilities that came up, but the maintenance program isn't working very well. And the definition of those breakdowns are breakdowns such that the bus is sitting on the side of the road or can't finish delivery or can't get to pick up or return to the bay. So it greatly impacts service. So, as we're talking about opportunities for regionalization, the maintenance program is broke, by that definition. It's just, vehicles break down every 0.8 days, in other words, based on your data. And I thought, well, maybe the wrong numbers were put in the wrong box, the numbers were put in the wrong box when we were filling that form. So I went back a year or two. And you guys had that high breakdown rate, so something's not working with it, which may point to that's an obvious opportunity for some regionalization savings that then would flow directly through to the Cumberland County taxpayers and the taxpayers of Harrisburg and Dolphin. So it's something to look at and consider.
I did want to get back to, Mike mentioned earlier the shortfall. 'Cause I looked at that, I did have a little bit of an issue with that. Typically, when I think of a shortfall, it's funds that you're required to pay that you didn't pay. If you look back, you make a funding request to the county. We agreed to pay you a lower rate. There's other county agencies that will request money from the commissioners, even my department. They may come back and say, no, it's this amount. So I don't think that shortfall is appropriate. When you look back over since 2008, again, we've paid almost $2 million in excess, extra funding. To come back and say now there's another $24,000 we should pay, I'm not sure that's appropriate. But that's up to the board to decide. It probably wouldn't have my recommendation to pay that. There's excessive operational costs to the tune of almost $2 million that we paid. There's to be used for other purposes, capital and other things, that to come back and say, well, you still owe us another $25,000. Gets back to my question, man, why does this cost so much? It doesn't cost this much in other areas, and now you're coming back for another $24,000 from previous funds. And again, we didn't commit to pay that higher level. We committed to flat fund CAT at that previous rate. I think that was an agreement by everybody.
Contextually, everybody needs to understand state funding based on the numbers you present. State funding went up 3 years ago, 6.2%, which is a healthy rate. I know our tax revenues didn't go up that much. And then last year, state operating funds went up 7.5%. That's great. And then this year you project an increase of 8.7%. And I know our minimum contribution, included in what we've given you the last 3 years, is going to 5%, at least 5%. So I think, in that context, coming back and saying, we need extra optional funds for you that we're not obligated to give. I can't understand that in terms of these large state. Act 89 solved a lot of the transit funding issues for transit agencies in the Commonwealth. So the context isn't there to legitimize that type of request.
And then where are we on sort of that march to the magical 15%? I just am throwing that out there.
Yeah, that hits,
mean,
I
are
think,
we-
if I can, 2024, give or take a year.
Oh,
Yeah, well,
I only think if we project, it depends on how, right now, actually, if you look from the 14-15 year to the 15-16 year, it's actually gonna be less of the funding. It's, you know, this year, the 14-15 year is actually, the percentage is less than it was in 13-14.
What's paper about a regionalization initiative, that the PennDOT will push that march to the 15% out 5 years into the future. And then after that 5-year local subsidy forgiveness window, we pick back up in year 6 where we would have been in year 1 under the abatement period. So we get a 5-year deferral. That's per the officials at PennDOT. That's how they're applying that, for example, in the bargain merger. Okay, so very, very favorable to us. And then dollars go back into service and we can look at expanded routes, you know, through some of the savings we've been talking about.
Bill, where are we in terms of the other partners with respect to the funding agreement that, you know, we've approved it? Have the other entities approved it yet?
I know if the Harrisburg, their finance committee approved it last night. It's going to the full board next week. I'm not sure where Dauphin County is, but I don't expect any issues there. But can I take a second to answer your question, Gary? Why is it so much more? And one of the issues you have to understand is we were sort of saddled with, and I hate to keep going back, when they enacted Act 8, or Act 44, then became Act 89, they had to start somewhere with what the local share was. And so what they did is said, going into it, whatever your percentage is, that's where you're gonna start at. You know, Red Rose and Rabbit at the time was a rural system, so their rate was even much lower. They were like under 5%. For some reason that I can't speak to, the cap was in excess of 10% at that time, but that was your starting point. So we started out percentage-wise much higher, and they keep adding the 5% to it every year. So that's why why it is so much higher, even at the state minimum. I'm not speaking to the additional amount. But I will say right there is, I did what had been done for years, and I have been led to believe that was at the direction of the funding partners. If they wanted to change the rules, all we had to do was talk about it. We're changing the rules. I was just trying to follow what had been done for years.
I think the Farm Bill is, you know, I agree with you on that. But all that means to Cumberland County as taxpayers is they've been paying far more than other counties in the region and elsewhere for transit, because you guys have had a cost structure back when, a high cost structure back when Act 44 went into place. And we have an opportunity with the region and the assistance offered by PennDOT, it can be structured in a manner agreeable to all, to change that structure, that whole paradigm, to the benefit of everybody.
And I think myself, for the effort and the time and all that the county has put, every department, into, from the PMF study, looking at every possible opportunity for savings. I would personally be remiss if I did not take a hard look at this opportunity for PennDOT to capitalize on what savings might be out there. I don't believe, again, personally, that we've got the luxury to sort of wait on this, or I made reference to another study on this. This county invested a great deal of effort and money into a significant study of all our departments. We're implementing a lot of that right now. Called upon every department to take a hard look at where the taxpayer dollars go. And this, to me, is a significant expenditure that we've got that, maybe out there's a different way to do it. So.
Bill, I know a lot of attention has been focused by Mike and others on the administrative costs of CAT. In your cover letter, on your budget proposal, I think, sent to Commissioner Cross, and a copy of all this, you said that you were several administrative positions are being eliminated. All right. And according to what I read, it says several administrative positions are being eliminated, or have been eliminated. Is that true or not true, or where are we in terms of, I mean, are administrative costs lower, going to be lower now than they were last year, or are these just some positions and then you've got new ones that have been created?
You know, we've been remaking the whole organization to try to make it more efficient and more responsive to the customer. And I guess you're challenging us. I really want to go back and want to see how these other authorities are doing it with so much less staff. I want to see how they're categorizing. Are they categorizing some of the, you know, frontline managers who maybe even higher under operations or under maintenance? I can't speak to that. I'm speaking off the cuff, and I don't have the luxury of all that information.
Well, I mean, you can get back to us later. It just says one paragraph, you said on the expensive side of the equation, all line items have been scrutinized and several administrative positions eliminated. And so that's what I was asking, what those positions are that are being eliminated.
Bill? Bill, I've looked at staffing across, compared to staffing different both for drivers and maintenance people, maintenance and non-maintenance. And your driver contingent is about on par, although, you know, admittedly what Barb said about acknowledge the no-show provision in the contract requires additional staffing, as the state consultant report acknowledged. So if your other areas seem on par, you know, to take, you know, even if there is classification issues, then, you know, taking the 14 positions that are in excess, seem in excess in general administrative and sticking it in the other positions, move them up so that they seem inefficient and out of whack as compared to the peer group we looked at.
I think the sense is, and we're getting on in terms of we're over on our time. I
I
think.
did have one, if I could ask one additional question.
By all means.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Now, there was a lot of talk within the past year or two about, and I think Larry touched on a little bit about CAT building a new maintenance facility and possibly a public-private partnership arrangement for some facility that was going to cost millions upon millions of dollars. One of the things in the new funding agreement that we signed and approved, you know, it talks about making a projection for 5 years on all capital expenditures. I looked at what you presented here relative to the 5-year plan, and I don't see anything in here relative to building a brand new building. Is that, in other words, we're not suggesting that, because one of the things in the new funding agreement is what are the capital projects, and then what is our cost? So I don't see any of that in this for the next 5 years. Is that correct?
Well, right now, that plan is fiscally constrained. That means we're dealing with no funding sources that we have. That's all that does. There's how many $1 million? At least $1 million of bus replacements. How many that aren't included in there because we don't have a funding source identified for it. We know we need a building. I know there's other capital needs that we have. We do not, that's not built into this 5-year plan because we don't have funding sources identified. And right now, trying to work with PennDOT in any way, any of the FTA, finding.
But under the agreement, if I understand it correctly, those things are supposed to be included, otherwise they don't get funded. Is that correct? I mean, in other words, you can tell us 2 years from now, we do have a brand new Spaghetti building in the part of the plan. Is that, I mean, because, or are we, I mean, how is that going to work? That's my question.
Now, Jim, you have a good point. I had the same question. As part of the new local funding agreement, we did have that capital plan request to list the projects that are out there. Recognize some of those may not be on the radar now, you may not know what the funding is, but I think giving the commissioners a snapshot of some things that may be out there, like the bus replacements, like the facility, and just putting them out there, estimated costs of what you know best, I think would be good. And then potentially the share we would have on it. Because I think that the local funding agreement, accountability, transparency, cost containment, are the 3 things. and make sure there's no surprises for the board, so that if funding were to come up and you come back and say, hey, we have to replace all of our buses now, they at least knew about it as part of this. And I think that's the one thing that is missing from this. The last sentence of the next, of your paragraph here about the future financial ramifications, that has me concerned. And I think as we move ahead, we want to remove those uncertainties in the future to the greatest degree that you can, to let the board know this is what's on the horizon. We may not know the exact cost, but they're there, so that we don't have the surprises coming back later on. And if you do ask for more money at some point for capital, we can see a clear link between that ask and what it's going to be spent for, not an ambiguous ask, and then see it as for capital and tomorrow's use for operations. So I think that clarity is some things that the board needs to see now and also in the future.
And if I can follow up on what Kirk just said, on that same point, I had a circle of something to talk to you about expenditures. It would be for expenditures that would not be eligible or have federal funds available. Typically, the federal government for capital, of course, gives 80%, then the state makes up the bulk of the difference, and we have a small, actually 2/3 of 1% of the total expenditure, not 3 1/3. But if the federal funds aren't forthcoming for a particular capital project, I think there's a difference in expectations that you're going to be able to get them from. If you can't leverage one of our dollars with 4 federal dollars, we don't necessarily want you going ahead with a project at 100% local funds. Okay, so I think at best we'll be able to help talk with you with PennDOT, help you in that dialogue. But you shouldn't have the expectation of coming to us where the capital projects are not approved for federal dollars, because we just can't spend $5.
That would be foolish. That would be foolish.
Where we should be spending one.
Yeah.
One piece I'd like to add about the facility, and I want to preface it with, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but right now PennDOT's taking the lead on this through the P3 project. That's true. PennDOT they put out requests for information, they have 100% of the lead. I do know, I think it's on the 16th of this month, where PennDOT staff, both Toby and Frank Kendra, who is the manager of the P3 project, is actually scheduled to come in and brief the board on where they're at.
The CAT board.
The CAT board. So at this point, it's not in our plan, or I didn't include it in the plan because it's more of a PennDOT project at this point.
Well, until they
We don't even know what
tell us how much
the
it is
status
we owe.
Yeah.
Then it's our project.
But
So, but
we
I
don't
mean-
even know the status at this time. On the 16th, we will have more information.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So
So what,
I
Bill,
appreciate, you bringing that to our attention to that. And
we'll have a lot better feel after that meeting on the 16th.
And I mean, this is one of the things when you have, a significant part of the bill where transit, understands, is paid for by the state, and they have their ideas, we have our ideas and so forth, but still in all, it's our responsibility to make sure that it's serving the best interest of our citizens. So, and I know I'm going to let Larry conclude now because.
I'll never hear the end of
But I know. Well, we've had a lot of talk about regionalization, and we are, I think, all interested in moving forward with that. I mean, what I heard today, with respect to maintenance, I mean, maybe there can be an effort at regionalization and maintenance, to save costs and improve the outcome with respect to all that. Don has his hand up, but let me just finish my thought. I don't know whether all this, with respect to what we need to do relative to moving forward with that, is going to happen in time to meet our immediate situation within, which is going to be, a passage of the county budget and trying to figure out what the appropriate level is of funding that we provide for CAT, for the 2015 budget year. So I do think, we need to get to the bottom line here at some point in terms of what is going to be our level, our matter of funding. The only thing I would bring up relative to the, this is how much you owe, and Kirk's point. Well, I mean, we did have the city of Harrisburg that, for a couple of years, Cumberland County paid whatever you requested. Dauphin County paid whatever you requested. And, the city of Harrisburg, during their financial problems, did not pay. So we still have that issue of making sure that whatever we come up with here, at the end of the day, is fair to everybody.
My point exactly, because, I hear what Kirk's saying, and I can't totally disagree, but I also heard you loud and clear when you insisted that it be fair. And when you're talking in regards to the shortfall from Harrisburg, wanting them to get caught up, I heard it loud and clear, but how can I look at them with a true, honest face and say, oh, that pertains to you, but not to here? I don't know how to sell that.
Yeah,
No.
because essentially last year, the city of Harrisburg, the current budget, the city of Harrisburg paid what you asked.
Yes.
And Dauphin County and Cumberland County didn't pay what you asked.
Correct.
Just so we're clear about that.
But we all agreed, Jim, when they committed for a budget, we said we're gonna flat fund them. Everybody around the
Yeah.
table agreed, there was no
No, you're-
secret of what we were paying.
No, you're
That's a
right.
clear, that's a very
No,
clear
no,
difference.
You're absolutely, you're
In
absolutely.
subsequent years, doesn't make any sense. I'm going as the last person before I make my.
The only thing I was going to mention to the commissioners and the rest of the staff, Eric Regale, our chairman, has sort of tasked me to honcho this and put together this regionalization and mutual working relationship or whatever. So I will keep you all informed as that moves along, if there's changes. I mean, I won't run in under 5 days to tell you. When there's something important to tell you, I'll make sure you know about it, but I'm sort of going to be trying to honcho this as much as I can.
Thanks, Don.
My only observation on this, I also don't want us to just be the on the receiving end of that. I think
The
we
what?
need to be- We, on the receiving end,
Oh,
we
sorry,
need to be an
I
active
didn't
part of that conversation.
That's what you got me for.
Is that good?
All right, absolute final, Mr. Clapson.
If I can, the October 16th meeting regarding new facilities.
Right.
Any decision on that, no commitment should be made until we get the phase 2 regionalization recommendation from PennDOT.
We
That will
don't
be
plan
weighed
to.
by all parties.
Yeah.
And if there is opportunity for the maintenance type facility savings or whatever kind of shared services, it should be taken into account before anything like that is proceeded
Yes.
with. That in and of itself, just maintenance facilities, could result in that 5-year forgiveness of county.
It's strictly informational and to bring us all up to speed so we can get over all the rumors and this and that and whatever that we're hearing about. That's what it's
Even
for.
savings on the state piece
Right.
flows through the county commissioners and relieves them of pressure to raise taxes within 5 years.
On that note, first I'd like to thank our guests. Hopefully you'll be able to come back and have a beer and hang out.
You're fine.
You will, absolutely. Okay. I would just, and I think, I think we're all appreciative of the good faith efforts that people made to reverse what was a onerous inheritance and the impact of that. But I think, like, if to people know me, know I like metaphors, so that legacy dug a huge ditch for us to fill. And we can fill it with a spoon, or we can fill it with bulldozer. Bulldozer get done a lot quicker. I think there's a bulldozer on the horizon, it's called regionalization, much more comprehensive, largest economies of scale perspective to bring on this, which I think will make not only things better for us here in Cumberland County, but for all the other funding partners and for the people in CAC who I think are trying to do the best job as possible. I think it unties people's hands, gives them options and opportunities that don't exist if we just try to solve it within the narrow boundaries that we're currently trying to. But I think we're all have a common interest in this. We appreciate the efforts that you made. We appreciate you coming over here and giving us a presentation. I think there's some further discussion that will have to take place. There'll probably be some back and forth with some additional questions and requests for clarifications. We do very much appreciate you taking the time to put together the presentation and coming here to do it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if I may, we have a representative from Representative Glenn Grell's office
Yes, ma'am.
that would like to introduce himself. Would you please?
Oh, thank you. My name is Eric Smith. I'm Representative Glenn Grove's District Office, new outreach specialist. Essentially, any dealings that I'm still learning on how I would work with, especially the commissioners. I just recently addressed the water cat program, so I'm familiar with you guys. So any way that I can help you guys or vice versa, just looking
Great.
forward to that.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.